Disease is silent until it raises its ugly head. It doesn't occur one day to the next. A gentleman has a heart attack. It didn't just happen the day before. Yes, he had the heart attack today, but something was going on before in his heart. It's the same thing in joint disease. It's a silent disorder. So you're on the horse, you feel the horse isn't moving well, and you say, oh my God, I've ridden this horse every day. Now it doesn't feel perfect. So you do an x-ray or you do an MRI and you don't see anything because it's a silent disorder. There's inflammation going on inside the joint that you don't know about. Then suddenly you get an articular effusion. You get fluid in the joint. Then you start having inflammation. It gets red, it gets hot. It's a vicious cycle. It's a cascade phenomenon that suddenly gets worse and worse and worse. Next slide, please. Okay, this is silent osteoarthritis. So this is a very scientific slide, but it shows you that the joint has communication. There's a language inside the joint, and those are called free radicals. We all know about DNA. Everybody has chromosomes. Everybody's inherited something from their parents. But then how does the chromosome send a message to the body to produce proteins? It's called RNA, message RNA. There's a language here. So in the joint, there are stem cells, and the language is transmitted to the membrane of the joint, to the structures within the joint, to the matrix around the joint, and your body produces these natural proteins. And you can look at the slide on the right, IL-1, TNF alpha, those are inflammatory proteins. Those are not the good guys. We don't want them, but they occur with acute inflammation. When they become chronic, it becomes a problem. Next slide, please. So chondroitin sulfate is unique. And what we discovered, what's very important, is the sulfate molecule. One sulfate, and I'll show it to you later, at the 4 position. That's why it's called chondroitin 4 sulfate. It's made from cartilage, whether it's human or cow, from the trachea. It's very pure in the windpipe of mammals. And it has a very potent anti-inflammatory effect at the synovial membrane, the membrane that's in the joint. And we also have evidence that it diminishes these inflammatory markers I showed you called NF-kappa B, TNF alpha, IL-1B. And we can measure that today. We're now measuring this in autism. We can measure this in joint disease. And we know that it improves inflammation within the joint, and I'll show you that. Next slide, please. Okay, I call this the bottle brush slide because it really gives you an illustration of what chondroitin sulfate is. The bone is hyaluronic acid. That center column is hyaluronic acid, and coming out from the side, little spicules with the chondroitin sulfate on them. It does look like a brush of a bottle. And you could see that the structure of this is there to relieve pressure. So when you have compression, walking, jogging, riding a horse, barrel racing, jumping, each one has more severe pressure. That chondroitin sulfate was put there by evolution, or whatever you believe in, force of nature, God. It was put there to protect that joint so you could jump and move around. Next slide, please. We're getting more granular here. We're jumping in. You could see the structure in yellow on the left, and that's your hyaluronic, good one, yes. Who's doing that? Rich, you did that?
I got you. Boss.
God, you're good, Rich. All right. Anyway, and you could see the proteoglycan aggregans. That's chondroitin sulfate. Look how many are. They only have a couple of strips of hyaluronic acid, but look how many aggregans you have. That's another name for chondroitin sulfate. And then look it to the right. That cell in the middle is your stem cell. That's called a chondrocyte. And when you have damage in the joint, that, you know what stem cells are, they rejuvenate, they replace things, and they can produce the molecules and the proteins that can fix the holes in your synovial membrane, can reduce inflammation. So this is a really key illustration of the key role why chondroitin sulfate was put into the joint. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to show you, let's really show you what can happen in arthritis and inflammation. So we took 6 horses with diagnosed joint osteoarthritis and lameness. We had equal geldings and mares, and we injected 1 dose of 100 milligrams of chondroitin sulfate IM. And I say the 4 because at the 6 it doesn't work as well. And if you have polysulfated with more sulfates, they don't work as well. It has to be 1 sulfate. And this is what nature gave you. This is what a child is born with at the 4 position. So we collected synovial fluid day 0, 3, and 7. Next slide, please. This is the joint fluid taken from that horse on 72 hours. So we did it at 0, 3, day 7. So this is at 72 hours. 100 milligrams chondroitin sulfate. Look what happens. You see the heme color on the left, you have some blood, and if you put it between your fingers, it has no elasticity, it has no viscosity. It's just runs away from your fingers. After 72 hours, look at the clarity of the joint fluid, natural color, and if you took it between your fingers, you would feel a stickiness, as if you now know that the buffering capacity is back into the joint. But just don't believe that. Let's look at a biomarker. Let's look at, next slide, please. Let's look at a marker of arthritis, of inflammation, C-reactive protein. C-reactive protein is one of these molecules that the body produces in response to inflammation. It could be in the heart, it could be in the liver, and it can be in the joint. So on day 3, compared to day 0, every one of those horses had a marked decrease in levels of CRP. And look at on the last column is the amount of CRP reduction. Every horse, 100% response with injection IM of chondroitin sulfate. Next slide, please.
Marvin, real quick, there's so many times I've heard you talk about that viscosity. The first one, are you talking about the viscosity of almost like water from what that first test tube was like?
Yeah, it's gone. It's gone with the inflammation. Remember, all those inflammatory molecules are destroying the synovial membrane, and you're not producing natural fluids. You have all these unnatural, all these cytokines, TNF alpha, IL-1B, interleukin. By the way, they're also present in cancer too. The body has the same formula. It responds the same way. We're just picking up these biomarkers in the joint. And that's what destroys the viscosity. Remember, these are enzymes also. They break down the proteins. So you don't have any normal protein. So you have some, but not enough.
So again, no cushion in that first one, but on that second one, was it more like olive oil? Was it more like motor oil? Like how much more viscosity was it?
Oh, it was sticky. You would feel it on your finger. You would go to wash your hands to get it off. So I was surprised in 3 days to have that kind of response is unheard of.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And Rich,
you're welcome.
Rich.
Sir.
So when we were doing that test, I was actually there whenever those were pulled. In fact,
by the way, he had more hair than you.
I did not have any more hair. Rich was born with that hair. I was born with this hair. Anyways, so the way that my wife used to explain it to me is that normal synovial fluid, if you put it between your fingers and you rubbed it together and you pulled it out, if you got it an inch apart, if you could get your fingers an inch apart and still have the synovial fluid touching between the two, that was considered normal or good synovial fluid. When you initially do those and it comes out and it's all watery and gooey, it doesn't stick at all. It really doesn't matter what you do. When we did it after the 3 days and we would put it between, I could literally pull my fingers 4 inches apart and the synovial fluid would still be sticking to each side. It would be like a piece of chewing gum that you were pulling apart. It was so sticky and thick. It was crazy. That was it.
Rich, are you okay with that?
It's,
Any other questions?
I mean, it's just, I've heard you speak of it a few times, and just the amount of, I guess, viscosity difference to it is just something that's been so curious. And I know if I'm kind of thinking it, there's probably a bunch of other people that might've been thinking it too. Just you made it now so visual in my mind to really identify how much of a difference you saw in that.
The problem is, you have to visualize it yourself. It really, Dorian and I were blown away by the results that quickly. We never expected, and it was positive. It was reassuring to me because I had worked on this for so many years. Next slide, please. Oh, so no, you can go back to that. I want to tell people that what we're saying is backed up by science. Everything I'm saying has a positive, peer-reviewed scientific publication. So if anyone out there has any questions about things I'm saying, please challenge it. There are no stupid questions, there are only stupid answers. And we should be able to back up everything we're telling you with respect to the science involved in this program. Thank you.
No, thank you, sir. I mean, again, one of the things we have so much fun is when we get you on the call, we get to have some questions and stuff answered. But it's this is one of those, actually, I was able to keep up on this one. I was able to keep up. Sometimes that scientific lingo gets me a little bit at times, but you really made it pretty good for me on this one here. We have a few questions. Do you have some time for us?
Absolutely.
So, in case for those of you that may not know at this moment, we do have another company that's launching. We have another product that's hitting the marketplace here shortly and soon. And Dr. Marvin here, Dr. Hausman, I almost want to say your whole full name at times, but it's really
Marvin. I'm too old. Forget
No. Dr. Hausman. He is actually the Chief Medical Officer for Eternipure, and is going to be working in conjunction with us moving forward. And we're so happy that you have decided to be able to devote some time and to come and be a part of that. So I think some of these questions are from some of the folks that know about that already. So just to kind of put it out there for everybody, because we do have a few coming in, and some of these questions might be a little bit more towards Summit. Some of them might be a little bit more towards the Eternipure side and that new human oral product that we have coming to the marketplace.